So before we get into it, let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for another beautiful day that you have given us. Father, I pray now that you would open our eyes so that we can see the last, what you have in store for the last days more plainly. Father, I ask that your presence would surround this place and that the evil angels would be driven away from this place. Father, I ask that you would be with us and just keep us safe. In Jesus' precious name I pray. Amen. So to start, I'm going to read you guys a story about Daniel and his 3 friends. King Nebuchadnezzar gave the signal, and as the music from 1,000 instruments began to swell, the curtain fell, exposing a dazzling 90-foot image of gold glimmering in the sunlight. Then, according to king's command, all the officials who had gathered on the plain of Dura fell prostrate to the ground in devout worship. All bowed down except 3 young Hebrew men who were servants of a greater king, who were servants of God. King Nebuchadnezzar was beaming with pride and satisfaction until it was reported that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had refused to bow and worship his image. Astonished that anyone would dare to disobey, Nebuchadnezzar assumed these young advisors must have misunderstood his decree. So he offered them one more chance to bow down, but they refused. Now the king's expression turned to rage. He ordered his soldiers to heat the nearby furnace 7 times hotter than normal. As fuel was piled onto the fire, the 3 men were firmly tied with ropes. The resulting heat was so intense that it killed the soldiers, who threw them into the blazing inferno. As the king peered into the roaring furnace, his mouth suddenly fell open. With a trembling voice, he asked, "Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire?" His counselors agreed that they had. Then the king said, "I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God." Daniel 3:25. God delivered those brave young men in the fiery furnace because they stood up for his truth. In the last days, God's people will have to face a similar test. So I think we can see a lot from this story. I think we can learn a lot from this story. But getting into our Sabbath school, our first question is, how does our story in Daniel 3 relate to Revelation? So could I please have a volunteer to read Revelation 13, verse 15? Sure. So, does anybody want to volunteer? Yes, Mike.
He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed.
So, we see that in the last days, God's people will once again be forced to worship contrary to their conscience. They will have to choose between man's law and God's law. So does anybody else have any feedback that they would like to share? Yes.
When Jesus came to this world, the devil tried to get Jesus to worship him. And that's what he's always been trying to do. That's what he's going to do. That's what he's going to do at the end of time. The devil is going to try and get the world to worship him. If you go to the first part of Revelation chapter 13, it says, "And all the world wondered after the beast, and they worshiped the dragon,
And we'll be getting
which
to that
gave
part.
power unto the beast." And the dragon is Satan. So in the very essence of worshiping anything else but God, we are worshiping Satan.
Yep.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have have any feedback that they would like to share? Yes.
I just noticed that they're both images. And the devil never does anything out in the open. It's always undercover. So, yeah, both images.
So our next question. What are the three angels' messages of Revelation 14? So I need 3 volunteers for this one. So if somebody would like to turn to Revelation 14, verse 7, and then I need somebody else. Well, actually, we can do 1 volunteer. If somebody wants to read Revelation 14, verse 7 through Revelation 14 through 10.
Revelation 14, 7 through 10.
Yes.
Saying with a loud voice, "Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters." And there followed another angel, saying, "Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication." And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb."
So what are the 3 angels' messages? Well, we see in verse 7 that the first angel said with a loud voice, "Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters." And then the second angel's message. "And there followed another angel, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication." And then we have the third angel. "And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone, and in the presence of the holy angels, and in the presence of the Lamb." So if we're on Satan's side and the end comes and we're still on Satan's side, we will be tormented with fire and brimstone. But if we're on God's side, we'll go to heaven. Does anybody have any feedback they would like to share?
So well, we have to know what Babylon is.
Right.
So does any, Babylon is, if I understand it correct, is confusion, religious confusion. If we look in the world today, there's between 30 and 40,000 denominations, Christian denominations in the world today. And here it says, well, where does the word Babylon come from? It comes from the Tower of Babel. It means confusion. And so we have to know what Babylon means. If that makes jump.
I was just following along here how we're reading from the first angel, second angel, and third angel, and I don't know. I was thinking back in time through the Dark Ages. It almost describes this. The first angel comes and says, "Worship God," and the second angel says, "Babylon is fallen." Would that be at the end of the 1260 years when the Pope was taken captive? I don't know. And then the third angel comes along, and it talks about, the beast that that we should not receive. I'm not sure, my mind went back in the Dark Ages, and I'm not sure if it's pointing to that. Could anybody kind of give a little feedback on that?
The way I understand it is the first angel's message is at the end of the 2300-day prophecy. That is when the hour of his judgment has come. That's when Jesus moved in the sanctuary from the holy place into the most holy place, and that is when the end time started. And that is the judgment, and then it goes into give honor and glory to him. What does it say about who made heaven and earth and the sea and all that? It absolutely quotes the fourth commandment of Exodus 20. So that is actually, if you put it all together, it's pointing to the Sabbath. And then the second angel's message is, trying to remember, Babylon is fallen. That is, Babylon is confusion, and that is all the denominations that rejected the Sabbath. And they continued in the doctrine of Catholicism, basically. And basically it boils down to Sunday worship, to be just blunt. And it boils down to Sunday worship, and they refuse. It says, is fallen, is fallen. It says it twice. So that is a continuation of falling church. It's getting worse. Means it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And towards the end, it's going to be so bad that they're going to be in so deep idolatry that even a child can see and tell the difference. So that's all I have.
Okay, our next one. What does a beast represent? Oh, do we have somebody else? No? Okay. Our next one. What does a beast represent in Bible prophecies? So, could I have a volunteer to go to Daniel 7, verse 17? Yep.
These great beasts which are four kings which shall rise out of the earth. As you think about this three angels' message, God has a message going to all the world today. He's calling us back to the Sabbath and the creation and all these different things, and Babylon has fallen. As our brother just stated there, the confusion in the religion today is it's getting worse every day.
Yep.
And the mainline churches that used to believe the Bible don't believe a lot of it anymore. But God's going to have a people that are ready for him to come, and there's only be one faith, one Lord, one baptism. God's going to have, Jesus said, I have other sheep not of this fold, them also I shall bring, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. So when Jesus comes back, there's going to be one church that are following him, and all the others will be destroyed. And we need to be sure that we're on the right track, that we're having experience with him, and be ready for his coming.
Yep. And then, if I could ask somebody to read Daniel 7, verse 23.
Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces.
And then another volunteer to read Daniel 8, verse 21.
And the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king.
So we see that, I don't know, but I think verse 23 of Daniel 7, I think that's when the four kingdoms, split up and, went into the whole world. I think that points it out pretty clearly. And then we have verse 21. Like today, we have America. We have our symbol for America is an eagle. And so a beast in Bible prophecy is not a disrespectful term. God uses, like we do today, God uses beasts and animal characteristics to symbolize governments and powers. And so, we do the same thing today. So before we get into how does the Bible identify the beast, I would like to turn to Revelation 13 to kind of give us an overview. If I could ask somebody to read Revelation 1 through 10, that would be great. Yes, 1 through 10.
And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon the horns 10 crowns, and upon the heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and the feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and the whole world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blaspheming against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindred and tongues and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose name are not written in the book of life, the book of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. 10:2.
Yeah, to 10.
He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with a sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience of the saints. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints.
So could I have somebody else to read, continue reading in verse 15 through 18, the same chapter.
He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no man may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666.
So, now we're going to go to our next question. How does the Bible identify the beast? Revelation 13, verse 1. If I could have a volunteer to read that.
And I stood up on the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy.
So, I have a little note here. It says in Revelation 13, verse 1 through 10, and 15 through 18, God gives us 10 clues to help us identify the beast. He gives us a long list of characteristics so that we can be absolutely certain of the beast's identity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write these 10 points on this whiteboard, And then I'm going to put a little box beside every one of them. So if we can identify them, then I'm going to check them out. So let me find a marker. Okay, so here we have the 10 identifying points. So we saw in chapter 13, Revelation chapter 13 and verse 1, that it says the beast rises up out of the sea, which we can clearly see that it fits point number 1. So let's go on to our next question. This beast arises from the sea. Actually, we're going to go over it again. So, yes, Vernon.
Well, what does the sea mean? What does it mean that it rises up out of the sea?
Well, we're going to get into it.
Okay.
All right. Our next question. This beast arises from the sea. What does the sea or water symbolize? Revelation 17, verse 15. Vernon, would you like to read that?
Yes. And he says unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues.
So there you have it, right there. So I guess I kind of went ahead of myself a little bit there, but we see that this beast arises out of the sea, which I think is the papacy.
It rose out of a heavily populated
Right.
area. So that is what a sea represents,
So
yeah.
we see that it represents or it fits point number 1. So does anybody have any feedback they would like to share? Yes, Abe.
I would like to say for anyone that might be new to this message, to the beast message, the way we see it, we are kind of jumping in the middle of the history here, I would say, so to
Yes.
speak.
Uh-huh.
So if you look at the second angel's message there, where it was saying that Babylon is fallen, it is fallen. And it goes on to read that it is made all nations drink of the wine of her fornication. So there is an identification right there that we should start from Babylon to identify this power. And all nations are involved with it. So just wanted to point that out.
Does anybody else have any feedback they would like to share? If not, let's go on to our next question. Who gives the beast its power and position? So if I could have somebody, a volunteer to read Revelation 13, verse 2.
And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority.
So I got a little note here. The beast, which has a mark that we must avoid, obtained its power, authority, and capital city from the dragon. So to whom did pagan Rome give her authority, which I think verse 2 here is talking about pagan Rome when they transferred their power to the Roman church. So to whom did pagan Rome give her authority and capital city? History is clear that pagan Rome turned over its power and capital city to the Church of Rome. The following historical quote is typical. The Roman Church pushed itself into the place of the Roman world empire, which is the actual continuation. The Pope, who calls himself King and Pontifex Maximus, is Caesar's successor. So, point 2 fits the papacy as well. Yes, Abe.
Well, it says the dragon gives him his power, seat, and authority. And then in Revelations 12, verse 9, we can see who the dragon is. The great dragon was cast out, that old serpent, which is called the devil and Satan, which deceives the whole world. And he was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So the dragon so he gets his power from Satan.
So does anybody else have any feedback they would like to share? Yes, Ken.
Yeah, precisely. It is. The dragon is Satan. But when you read the comment on it in the book Great Controversy, she says the dragon primarily represents Satan, but in a secondary sense, it represents pagan Rome. So Satan works directly through these nations, and certainly in the case of pagan Rome, he worked through them and turned the power over to the papacy. Same way with the lamb-like beast in Revelation 13. It comes up with good qualities, but then it speaks like a dragon. Yeah, so it's obviously Satan working through these nations.
So, does anybody else have any feedback? If not, let's go on to our next one. How far reaching is the influence of the beast? So, if I could have somebody to read Revelation 13, verse 3.
And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast.
So we see that, and I also got a little note here. It says, no one would question that during the Middle Ages, the papacy was indeed a worldwide power. In fact, the word Catholic means universal. So we can also see that point 3 fits the papacy as well. They become a worldwide power. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to share or any feedback? Tom.
Just recalling, I think from Kenneth Cox, basically like, you know, in 1798, if I remember the date correctly, was when a French general took the Pope captive. And so that was when he got they got a deadly wound, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Catholic Church
Right.
got a deadly wound. But then it's been healed. Like, so
Yes.
you could see everything that's going on now. Like, the world is wandering after the beast, whether they fully realize it yet or not. Anyways.
Does anybody else have any feedback? Well, if not, let's go on to our next one. What comes out of the mouth of the beast? So if I could have a volunteer to read Revelation 13, verse 6.
And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven.
So we see that this beast blasphemes God. Now, blasphemy against God, the way I would understand it is, in the Bible, I also got a note here, the Bible defines blasphemy as a man claiming to forgive sins, Luke 5:21, and claiming to be God. The papacy boldly claims the power to forgive sins. Notice the following section from a Catholic catechism. Does the priest truly forgive the sins, or does he only declare that they are remitted? The priest does not really and truly forgive the sins in virtue of the power given to him by Christ. The papacy also claims that the Pope is equal with God. Pope Leo XIII said, "We, the popes, must hold upon this earth the place of God Almighty." Here is another startling statement about the Pope: "Thou art another God on earth." So we see that point 4 also fits the papacy. They're guilty of blasphemy. Actually, I forgot to check them out. I'll do that right now. So does anybody have any feedback?
Yeah, I'd like
Yes,
to
go.
make an observation here too. So you mentioned two things: man claiming to be God and man claiming the power to forgive sin. There is another definition of blasphemy in Revelation 2 and 3. And Christ said, "I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan." Of course, we know that Jew in the New Testament sense represents Christian, but it's the claim to be Christian when you are not.
Right.
And Catholicism claims to be Christian when it is not.
Uh-huh.
It's pagan,
Yep.
and it is antichrist. So there's another definition of blasphemy. They claim to be something that they are not. They claim to be followers of Christ.
But they're not.
No.
So does anybody else have any feedback they would like to share? Yes, Tom.
Yeah, just for everybody's edification, having grown up Catholic, I can say there's a lot of Catholics that, well, I've heard some Seventh-day Adventist preachers say, there's going to be more Catholics in heaven probably than Adventists, because there are so many of them, and they are ignorant, but they're faithful to what they do know, and some of them do know Jesus. So some are faithful to that light that they have. And I grew up in Catholicism. There were some people that did know Jesus. So don't think we're just bashing on people. We love those people. We care for those people. We want them in heaven. And there are many very faithful Catholics that when they finally get to know the gospel, they're wonderful Adventists. And obviously the Sabbath. So I just want to share that.
Yeah, if I may add to that comment, Revelation chapter 18, it says, "Come out of her, my people." So obviously this is exactly as was just said now. But here's the thing. When Christ calls his people out of Catholicism or whatever other false realm of religion, they may well be his people at that time. But if at that time they do not obey his voice, they will forfeit their position as his people. They will give it up. So, yes, there are true people, and as was said, we do not bash Catholics. But we are not anti-Catholic. We are anti-Catholicism. There's a difference. And you read very explicitly in the book, Great Controversy, she says, many of God's true people are in the churches that compose Babylon. But a test is coming. And if they do not abide by that test and are obedient to that test, then they will forfeit their position as God's people.
Also, I would say that, in my work, I work with a lot of different people from a lot of different faiths, and I can see that God is preparing people to face that test. And it's my prayer and hope that they will come out of Babylon when that test comes, and it's surely coming.
I think it's coming quicker than we know.
Yep.
It's pretty obvious.
There's somebody over here that would like to say something.
It's both all those that don't worship God and keep his commandments, so it's everybody, apostate Protestantism and Catholicism, and even us in the church, if we're not daily having that relationship with the Lord and keeping his commandments, we're right there with them. And so this message really is a global message, and it's, Satan has the power to deceive and set up his kingdom here. He can't set it up. He had a throne in heaven, and he was thrown out of there. And so he's here deceiving the whole world. And so we have to be careful that, just because, I'm going to say Joyce has to be careful. Just because I claim to be an Adventist doesn't mean that gives me the title to heaven. It's, am I having that relationship with Jesus? Am I keeping the commandments of God? And if I'm not, I'm in with the others. That's what it really boils down to. Who are we worshiping?
Mm-hmm. So, does anybody else have any feedback they would like to share? If not, let's go on to our next one. How long would this first beast rule? So if I could have a volunteer to read Revelation 13, verse 5.
And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months.
So I got a little side note here. It says, remember that in prophecy, one prophetic day equals one literal year, Ezekiel 4:6. This time period is repeatedly referred to in prophecy as 3.5 years, 42 months, or 1,260 days. Based on the 30-day calendar used by the Jews, all three time periods totaled the same, 1,260 prophetic days, or 1,260 literal years. The worldwide power of Papal Rome became official in AD 538, when Emperor Justinian's decree making the papacy supreme was no longer opposed. The papacy was dealt what appeared to be a death blow in 1798, when the Pope was captured by Napoleon's general Alexander Berthier. You will notice that the time period between AD 538 and 1798 is precisely 1260 years. So, point 5 also fits the papacy. He rules for 42 prophetic months. So, does anybody have any feedback? Yes, Ken.
This is an interesting point. When the Lord repeats something, he's emphasizing it. This period is repeated 7 times. Twice in Daniel, 5 times in the book of Revelation. Revelation 11, 12, and 13, it's repeated 5 times, twice in the book of Daniel. It's repeated 7 times. It's a very important prophetic time period.
Yep.
Yeah.
So does anybody else have any feedback they would like to share?
It's just little something, if you really study it, it's the 42 month. They came into power 538 AD, February 2nd. The Pope was arrested February 2nd, 1798.
Wow.
That's how precise the Bible is.
So we can see the Bible is true, definitely. And God is always on time. So does anybody else have any thoughts they would like to share or feedback?
1798 is a very important date. This is when the time of the end officially began. You read that in Daniel 12. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the word, seal the book, even the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Martin Luther didn't understand the book of Daniel. A great man. But it was sealed until 1798. And that's important to remember. And since then, this gospel message has gone around the world and going to soon finish here very quickly. We're just down at the very end of it now.
Mm-hmm. So our next one. What happened to the beast after 42 months? So if I could have a volunteer to read Revelation 13, verse 3.
And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast.
So I got a little note here. As already mentioned, the papacy received what appeared to be a deadly wound in 1798 when General Berthier took the Pope captive to France, where he died in exile. Half of Europe thought that this event signaled the end of the papacy, but God had said that the wound would be healed and that the papacy's power and influence would be restored until the entire world would follow her leading. Malachi Martin, consummate Vatican insider, reveals the following in his book, The Keys of This Blood. The Pope is the best known person of the 20th century. It has formed personal relationships with the leaders of 91 countries and is prepared for worldwide rule now. Even a novice would recognize that today the papacy is in many ways the most influential power on earth, and with each trip the Pope makes, his power and influence grow. Multiplied millions worldwide look to the papacy as the only hope for world unity, peace, and decency, precisely as God predicted. So we can see that the papacy clearly fits point number 6. Receives a deadly wound that heals.
And the wound was actually started healing. They gave Mussolini back in 1929 gave the papacy back its power, its political power. The papacy still had ecclesiastical power, but the Vatican is actually a country. It's the smallest country in the world, and it pretty much rules the whole world.
So does anybody else have any feedback? Yes, Ken.
Well, based on what Vern just said, that pretty much rules the whole world, that's exactly what the Bible says, because you read at the end of Revelation 17, it says, the woman which thou sawest, again the papacy, the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. And we know through the Jesuit arm of the Catholic Church, this is to a great degree being fulfilled. They've infiltrated governments, institutions, schools. Even the early founders of our church were aware of them. Maybe some of you have read the letter from Adams to Jefferson about the Jesuits and talking about them infiltrating all over. And he says if there's ever any group of men that merits the damnation of hell, it's the followers of Loyola. I mean, there's people all through, been aware of the power of the Jesuits, and we know that they are definitely alive and active now. So, yeah, the papacy's infiltration into governments and all parts of society, I'm convinced they're in the news media as well now. So they are very, very, very active. But John said, the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Yeah. And her deadly wound began to be healed. It is not yet healed. It's in the healing process. When her deadly wound is healed, she will have complete political power over the earth. And as per the enforcement of the National Sunday Law.
And we made huge strides towards that, or they made huge strides back in 2015. I don't know if any of you remember the Pope making a speech to join in Congress. That's the first time that ever happened in history, in U.S. history. That was a big deal.
Yeah, not only that, but where our president would stand to address the same bodies, the Pope stood higher. So, what does that tell you?
Well, I think it'd be telling us that, the United States might be putting the Pope above God. So,
Well,
yes,
not only that, but the Pope is above the president. And when he came here, he got off the plane, he kissed the ground. And when they do that, they're sending a message saying, this is mine. I own this.
Wow. All right. Our next one, is the beast a religious power? So if I could have somebody read Revelation 13, verse 15.
And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed.
So I got a little side note here. It is obvious that this entity would be involved in spiritual matters. The words worship or worshipped are used 5 times in Revelation 13 in reference to this power. So surely no one doubts that the papacy fits point number 7, which is a religious power that receives worship, which they do. Yes, Mike.
If you go back to the book of Genesis, the first murder was over worship. Cain killed Abel.
Uh-huh.
Abel worshiped God the way God had asked. Cain worshiped his own way.
Yep.
And it's going to be the same thing all over again.
Uh-huh. History repeats itself, doesn't it? So does anybody else have any comments? Yes, John.
Yeah, that's true for Cain and Abel, but isn't that repeated every time there was an image set up? Like King Nebuchadnezzar, his image, it was about worship.
Yep.
Wasn't it another time? I thought there was like 3 or 4 times throughout the history that it was always worship tied to it. Same way with Cain and Abel.
Yep. That's also something that I wanted to mention was throughout the Bible we see that every time, like Nebuchadnezzar, when he built his golden image, or whenever there was persecution, it was always about worship. Who will you worship? Will you worship Satan or will you worship God? Yes, Ken.
Yeah. It's always, let me say it this way. It is a characteristic of false religion that it uses force.
Yep.
And it uses persecution. When you read in Galatians chapter 4, Paul says, talking about Ishmael and Isaac, Ishmael persecuting Isaac, he says, as then he that was born after the flesh persecuted him that was born after the Spirit, even so it is now. So one of the identifying marks of false religion is that it uses coercion, pressure, persecution. And also, too, it's what we must keep in mind, and that is this, is that force is the last resort of a sinking cause. If someone has to use force to get converts to their religion, they are a losing force. They are a sinking cause. They are a wrong cause.
Yep.
We just must remember that. Yeah, we may feel pressure for a time, but God will win.
Yep. So does anybody else have any feedback?
I think they use censorship too.
Yeah. So our next one. What does the beast do to the saints? So if I could have a volunteer to read Revelation 13, verse 7.
And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to go and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations.
So we see that it is common knowledge that the papacy did persecute and destroy conscientious Christians, especially during the Middle Ages, the peak period of its control. Many historians say that more than 50 million people died for their faith. During this time of great tribulation, apparently, the church felt it was doing God a favor by stamping out heresy. The Pope has asked that the church be forgiven its atrocities, but the fact remains that it did persecute and destroy. So we see that the papacy also fits point number 8. It persecutes and destroys God's people. So does anybody have any feedback they would like to share before we continue? Yes, Ken.
Yeah. I don't want to talk too much, but I'd just like to make an observation here. When you've come to the end of Revelation chapter 18, talking again about the harlot, it says, in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. This is quite a statement. And what she has done in the death of many millions of the human's family is amazing. Wars that have been ignited. There's a book by Edmund Puri called The Secret History of the Jesuits. He documents in there that Adolf Hitler was put in power by the Jesuits. When you come down to the end of Revelation 18, it says, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. The word sorceries, as many people know, means pharmakia, which relates back to the medicine, the drug industry. And many people have met early death because of drug. Anyway, there's a lot there. Yeah, this is a very big, and the more we know from this power, just like it says in the book Great Controversy, Christians in times past taught their children to abhor popery. Yeah.
All this has been said today is true. But we need to realize also here, and you're probably going to get to this, but this other beast comes about the earth. Earth is opposite the sea. The first beast rose in Europe where a lot of people, but this is talking about the United States of America. And he says he comes like a lamb, but he speaks like a dragon. And then verse 12 says, and he, this apostate Protestantism beast, he exercises all the power of the first beast before him. So we've got something to face right here in our country that we've never faced before. Mm-hmm. But we're seeing it coming very rapidly today. And he's going to cause the earth to worship the first beast, or the Catholic beast whose deadly wound was healed. And so we've got some things, and the way our country is divided today, our political parties can't agree on anything except they hate each other.
Right.
And that's about the only thing they can agree on. And But they're going to come together, and all the world's going to wander after the beast. And they're going to enforce this Sunday law. And, well, I could talk a lot about it, but let's go on.
All right. Well, we're about to wrap it up here. So our last question is, what is the mysterious number that identifies the beast? So I think out of this whole study, yes, Kent, go ahead.
Will you let me?
Yeah, sure.
If I may, I just want to say something about this. There is a work done by a man named Edwin de Kock, okay? And he shakes every bush on this subject. It's 1,000 pages, it's 3 books about the number 666. And he nails it down that the number 666 is the official number of the Pope of the Catholic Church. And when you come to the end of Revelation 13, it says, "Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man." And there are contrary voices, even in Adventism now, that would try and lead us away from this. But Edwin de Kock has made a formidable case for this. Anybody with an honest mind at all is going to say he nailed it down.
Right.
Pope's title does equal out to 666. Yeah, as an identifying mark.
So what I was going to say is Revelation 13, verse 18 is probably the most critical verse in this study because, like Kent said, we need to identify the beast, and which we're going to get into in a little bit. So if I could have somebody read Revelation 13, verse 18, please.
Here is wisdom. Let him that has understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666.
So I got a little side note here. In Revelation 13, verse 18, God says to count the number of the beast's name, and that it is the number of a man. When we think of the papacy, the man we naturally think of is the Pope. What is his name? Well, one of the Pope's official titles is Vicar, the Son of the Son of God, which is in Latin, I hope I can pronounce this right, Vicarius Filii Dei in Latin, the official language of the church. News articles, when referring to the Pope as Vicar of Christ, will often enclose the words in quotation marks to show that they are a translation of his title or name. The book of Revelation is saying that the Roman numeral value of the letters of his name will equal 666. Well, let's see if it does. So I'm going to write the Pope's official title, and we're going to add it up. So, and then also, yeah. Okay, so over here. So now we're going to add it up. So 112, 53, and then 501. So can anybody tell me what 2, 3, and 1 equals 6? Okay, now 5 and 1, 6. And then, of course, 5 and 1 again. So we see that if we take the Pope's official title in Latin and we transform it or transpose it into the Roman numeral system, that it is indeed 666. So we see that point number 9, he has a mysterious number, which we just went over. And then point number 10 is led by one powerful man or supreme man. So, yes, Vernon.
And also in the book of Daniel, if you look at the dimensions of the golden image that they were supposed to worship, what were the dimensions of that? It was 666. It was there were, what was it, 60 cubits high, 6 wide, and 6 deep. Well, in Hebrew reckoning, it doesn't give the depths; it's just the same as the widths. And another thing when Solomon, the amount of gold that came into his kingdom yearly was 666 talents. I mean, it's just an interesting fact.
Yeah. So, got a little note here that I would like to read, and then we'll have closing thoughts. There should be no doubt remaining that we have shown all 10 characteristics portrayed in Revelation 13, verse 1 through 8, and 15 through 18, fit the papacy. And this power has a specific mark that we dare not receive. Please note that there are many godly, loving Roman Catholic Christians whom God counts as his children. There have also been many gracious and courageous popes who loved God. This lesson is not an attack upon our Catholic friends. It is an attack upon the devil, who lures churches away from spiritual truth. However, God himself has told us that this institution has a mark which we dare not receive, which we won't be getting into today, but sincere Protestants, Catholics, Jews, and non-Christians will be eager to discover what this mark is so they can avoid receiving it. So let's thank God that in his word he has exposed Satan's ugly plans to destroy us all. And we all, God can also give us the faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who were willing to face death in order to honor God. So I kind of got a closing statement here. It's just a real small one. Are you willing to follow Jesus wherever he leads, even though you may lose your friends? So does anybody have any closing thoughts they would like to share? Well, if not, let's close with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for giving us your word so that we can learn from it, Father. I want to thank you for the opportunity that you have given us to come together to study this subject this morning. Father, I pray that you would now be with us. And Father, I pray that you would be with our speaker as we go into the divine service. And Father, pray that you would guide us and help us to be in you for the rest of this day. In Jesus' precious name I pray. Amen.